right, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Danyelle Pollock. For the past year and a half, I've traveled to over 50 countries speaking with startups and founders and helping them understand how focusing on their employees can really bring them to the next level and set them apart. And I know this because for the 5 years prior to that, I was focusing on just that at a company called Lyft. So I'm here to remind you that you can't build a big company all by yourself. I've seen this, like I said, firsthand. I was employee number 52 at Lyft, and I've seen massive growth. And at a certain point, this massive growth, this rapid growth, really does affect every single employee. So I had a variety of roles at Lyft. I started as a community manager. I was working with drivers in one of our 8 cities that we were currently in at that point. And so what that meant is I was writing newsletters, and I was literally flying out to these cities to work with our drivers. We decided at a very early stage that our community was what was going to set us apart, and we cared a lot about our drivers. We wanted them to feel completely connected because drivers are not employees, they're contractors, so we wanted to make sure they felt totally taken care of and in the loop. And we quickly went from 8 cities to hundreds of cities in the US and realized that our community manager structure wasn't really working for us. We had to scale in a little bit of a different way. So from there, I moved on to the PR team. And that was really exciting because that was at a time when there was a huge kind of battle in the media between Lyft and Uber. It was fascinating to be able to kind of see behind the curtain on what people cared about and what people were writing about and everything that was going on there. And then finally, I ended up helping create an employee experience team. It became super obvious that was a need at a certain point. Here is a tool that we used at Lyft called the Family Tree. And so what this did was help our employees understand who they were meeting with. Maybe they had never seen this person before. They were emailing with them, they were gonna go have a meeting, and they didn't know what they looked like. So this was a tool to help them really understand how long has this person been at the company, what team are they on, who else is on their team, who is their manager, and even how many rides have they taken. So let's just back up for a second. What is Lyft? Who here has heard of Lyft? Who's ever taken a Lyft ride? Awesome. Well, the Lyft is only in the US and Canada right now. It is an on-demand transportation company. So a little known fact, it's the fastest rideshare company, fastest growing rideshare company in the US, covers 95% of the US. It also expanded to Canada last year, just IPO'd, and is currently providing millions of rides a day. So Lyft actually came up with the idea of using your own personal car to give people rides at a time when Uber was actually just a black car service, primarily being used for business. So you may have also seen the cars with the pink mustaches. We call these car stashes. And so this was obviously a very early marketing tool to help catch attention. Lyft has always been known as more of a quirky, fun brand. We have obviously refined the brand since then, and I think there are about 30,000 of these sitting in a warehouse somewhere. So if you have any ideas on what to do with them, I'd love to pass that along. So in 5 years, Lyft employees have grown 50x. Again, this doesn't include drivers. Drivers are contractors, and there are millions of drivers. But you can imagine that working at a company that goes from 100 to a couple thousand changes a lot of things. So this means you can no longer tell inside jokes. You go to an all-hands meeting, and when you're 50 employees, you can say, oh, remember that thing that Mark did last week? That's so hilarious. But suddenly you can't do that anymore because no one knows who Mark is. You have a bigger office, but you are starting to have conference room shortages. So you have a 12-person conference room, and one person has reserved it so that they can take a phone call. And so people are getting frustrated because they have nowhere to sit. They're having to move desks every week, and they have new managers all the time, and there are more levels of approval, and suddenly they have budgets, and they have a VP that they never had a VP before, and now that VP is changing the whole structure of everything, and it can be frustrating. It can be, the positive growth of the company can also be a really frustrating experience for an employee if they're not brought along with that growth. So another thing that is really challenging is when you suddenly you don't have one office anymore. You have multiple offices in multiple time zones, and you don't know how to communicate with all of those people. And maybe you start to feel like different offices are almost different companies. So it can be really challenging. This sort of complex is created that I describe as OG versus noobs. OG is kind of a term for original gangster, which is what a lot of people like to call themselves when they're the first of something, when they're kind of the original group that was there when it all began. And so at Lyft, we really were disrupting an industry. I know this is such a hot term that companies like to say now, but really, we were giving people rides in an app with the press of a button. There were no rules around this. Some people thought it was illegal. They were throwing our drivers in jail. These drivers were our friends. We knew a lot of them in person. We were getting insurance companies to create new laws. It was very exciting, and we were going through these things together. And so at a certain point, when new employees start getting added to the mix, you feel like, well, those employees didn't go through that with me. They'll never get it. They'll never be a part of this crew that was first created. And that can create this disconnect, this divide within your company that can really be poisonous. And so the need for my team for employee experience became really obvious around 500 employees. At that point, it's more difficult to know everyone by name, and that's when the OGs kind of started to become concerned with preserving this culture that they love so much and was the whole reason why they came to Lyft in the first place. Also at this point, you have more people, and so single voices, people who maybe one person used to speak up about something they didn't like, now this is becoming groups because people are listening to them and agreeing with them and saying, yeah, I want that too. You also start hearing more about benefits-related opinions, like people want gym reimbursement, they want more swag, but they don't want that swag, they want this specific swag. They don't want that granola bar, they want this different type of granola bar. So you need someone to be able to weed through what is actually important for the company versus who's just the loudest voice in the room. So what is employee experience? I can talk you through a million examples, but the heart of it is, it's every employee interaction from the first contact as a potential recruit to the last communication after the end of employment. So this is everything in between, right? This is work anniversaries, one-on-ones, all-hands meetings, fundraising announcements, performance reviews. Think of all these milestones that you hit within your company that are part of your life, part of the normal life cycle, and even in addition to those, personal things. So you had a baby, you take a vacation. This is all part of the employee experience, and this myth of work-life balance, it's not true. There's not two different worlds. You are one person, and your worlds are often interconnected. So it's not something that you can just say is important and make it important. You have to keep nurturing it constantly. At the end of the day, you want all of your employees to say and to think, I feel like I belong. So this means that their voice is heard when they speak up. It means they're respected by their peers and by leadership. They know how their work impacts the company, and they really feel comfortable bringing their full selves to work. It's really unfortunate when I hear friends who, maybe they don't want to share with their teammates that they have children because they don't want to be judged. They don't want to share what neighborhood that they live in because they don't want people to make assumptions about the type of person that they are. And when people can't bring their full selves and feel like it's, this space where they can contribute in a full way, then their work suffers. So you may not have 1,000 employees, and why should you really care about employee experience? And research tells us that when a company invests heavily in employee experience, on average they have 4 times the profit, 2 times the revenue, and are 25% smaller. A smaller company doesn't seem intuitive, but actually, because you're focusing on your employees, they're more engaged, and in turn they're more productive. So you need to hire less people to get the same amount of work done. So experiences They don't just mean fun parties and events. And so our strategy at Lyft was to set up employees for success by providing distinctive experiences that are aligned with our desired culture. And so we did this in a variety of ways. So we focused on employee brand, events, service and values, internal comms, and connection and leadership. So employee brand is, a lot of people forget that your employees are essentially a walking billboard for your company. This is when a new recruit wants to maybe come work for your company, what are they doing? What would you guys do when you're looking for a job? You're checking Glassdoor for reviews. You're looking at LinkedIn. You're seeing if there are any articles that have been written by former employees. You're talking to your friends. Do you have any friends that work there? Do they know anyone that works there and would be willing to talk to you about their experience? If someone's unhappy, if lots of people are unhappy at your company, then people who might potentially apply for a position are going to hear about that. Whatever ecosystem you're in, locally, it's not going to be that big, and it's always a small world. Someone will always know someone who works there and can speak to them about it. So investing in having happy employees who love where they work is really important. I think about 40% of Lyft's new hires, on average, are referrals from existing employees. So events. Like I said, employee experience is not just events. You can't just have a bunch of parties and think, my employees are going to love it, they're going to be so happy, I did a great job, pat on the back, we have a wonderful culture. Events really need to be meaningful. They need to have your mission and your values really tied in. So at Lyft, we put a lot of effort into our all-hands meeting. We structured it like it was a late-night talk show. We had a desk that we got at a thrift shop up on stage. We had a host who would welcome different guests throughout different segments. We had fun bits and serious bits, and we wanted to hear from different people within the company, and we always incorporated our co-founders on stage at a certain point to make sure that people were hearing from them and understanding what was important and why we're talking about what we're talking about. And then service and values. It's so easy to go into your office, to sit at your desk behind your computer, and forget why you're doing what you're doing. You can kind of turn into a robot and same thing, different day, just like over and over. And so at Lyft, we incorporated a quarterly encouragement that people could reconnect with the driver community, because a lot of times they think, I don't even know any drivers, I would never be a driver, I don't know what their lifestyle is all about. And so we would encourage our employees to either become a driver for a day every quarter, answer support tickets for a day, or go work in a hub, which was a physical location where the drivers could come and get their questions answered. And this really helped keep our employees grounded and understand who the work that they were doing was impacting and understand why they were doing it. So internal comms obviously is what ties a lot of this together. You can be doing a million things, but if your employees don't understand it or don't even know that it's happening, then it's basically meaningless. So you can see our mission statement: improve people's lives with the world's best transportation. This was weaved into messaging from every angle. We created stickers, we had a mural on the wall, but that's not enough. We had to make sure this was coming from our leadership, and that every time there was a big announcement, every time we closed a fundraising round, every time there was a new C-level executive hired, we were reiterating what our mission was and how these changes were going to help tie that back in. And then connection and leadership. At a certain point, we got to a size where maybe not everyone knows who the founders even are. They don't know what they look like, they don't know what their names are, because maybe it doesn't impact their work. For me, that was very surprising as a discovery, because I was working with these men every day, and I knew exactly who they were, and I thought everyone did. But some people, it's not important for them to know their job. So putting your leaders in a space where they can communicate effectively, they have the opportunity where they know what they should be talking about and how they should be talking about it, that's really important because it all trickles back down. And then connection, like I said, when I left Lyft, we were in, I think we had offices in 30 states. And so it's really hard to make sure that you're kind of bringing along the culture and the vibe with everything that you do. And we wanted to make sure that any Lyft office you would go to, you always knew that you were at Lyft. And it wasn't this, this one's kind of like this, and this one's decorated like this, and this one people don't come in the office till noon, and this one, you want everything to really feel like everyone's together and not San Francisco is the headquarters and everyone else is the ugly stepchild. It really takes a lot of effort to make sure that you're bringing everyone along with you. So back to the strategy that we had. So we want to set up employees for success by providing distinctive experiences. We talked about that, but that are aligned with your desired culture. So what is culture? This is probably the biggest buzzword in the last decade, in my opinion. Everyone says, oh, we have great culture. We have great company culture. When you're hiring, is this person a culture fit? But do people really know what this means? This is a huge part of an employee's experience. People who are interviewing can sense it as soon as they walk in the door. Are people smiling? Do they feel happy? Are they discussing things with each other? They feel it during the interview process when the person is asking them questions. Are they being respectful? Are they excited about the work that they're doing? Are they getting me excited about the work that I would be doing? So ultimately, company culture is the personality of your company. This is the shared values, the practices, and the beliefs of the company's employees. And your culture is virtually present in everything that you do, whether or not you define it. It exists. And so this is a photo from something at Lyft very early on that we called Fancy Pants Fridays. And it was just something that one employee felt called to create because, again, we were very quirky, very funny, and fun-loving culture. And this is something that our culture fostered and encouraged. So it's best to start thinking about what your company culture is when you're usually around 5 to 10 employees. Again, you don't need to invent it. It already exists. It's already there. And so if you're not sure where to start, here is a guide on some basic first steps. So first, you'll just want to observe your culture. How do people get along? Are they taking vacation time? Are they scheduling meetings effectively? There's a multitude of ways that you can kind of observe it. And then you just want to decide to shape it. So this means getting your leadership on board, making sure that people are supportive of you making this a priority, and they're really going to help bring it through everything that they're doing as well. And then identify how you can shape it. Are people, if you have an unlimited vacation policy, then make sure that your managers know to encourage that within their teams. There's so many ways that you can kind of bring this through. And then let your culture guide you, again, with how much maternity leave are you going to provide? What's the next product feature that you're going to launch for your users? This should be super clear. So Lyft's framework for a good culture incorporates, all of these things. It's authentic, inclusive, thoughtful. You have meaningful work and a business promise. It's innovative, community-oriented. There's trust in our leadership, and it's fun. But this is just Lyft's framework. This does not mean that this is what's right for everyone. You can't control your culture. It's always changing and evolving as the company grows. And you have to think of the things that would make up your ideal culture. So this is what we determined was right for Lyft. Buffer is a really good example who transparency is at the top of their list, right? They publish all their employees' salaries online, and they talk about when they're fundraising publicly. This is something that they want all of their employees to know exactly where the company stands, but this might not make sense for everyone. Again, Apple is an example of transparency, nowhere on their list, and that's for a business reason. They want to have these big unveiling events, and you can't talk about what you're working on your team with even other teams who work at Apple because it's so secretive. Airbnb is a good example of community at the top of their list. Their conference rooms in their headquarters are modeled after actual spaces that are listed on the Airbnb platform. So once you kind of create your framework, you can determine your core values. So at Lyft, ours were create fearlessly, be yourself, uplift others, and make it happen. And so we hang these up around the office. We made notebooks of them when they were announced. This also isn't something that we just decided. This was something we brought along everyone to help us determine what felt right to them and what felt genuine to them. You can't just put something on the wall and say, okay, now everyone follow this. This is what's important to you. This is what you want to make happen. you really need to make sure it feels right, right for you, otherwise it won't work. So once you make your set of values clear, again, acting on them is the most important thing that you can do. So some people think that employee experience is not needed at their company, and culture is kind of just a nice to have. It's this fluffy term, again, that everyone is talking about. So Lyft's biggest rival is Uber. You probably have some sort of opinion on Uber as a company, not in terms of how you use them or how successful they are, but how you think they treat their drivers and their employees. So in 2017, Uber had a series of blows. A female engineer exposed widespread sexual harassment within the company, and from her manager, who was a top performer, and so didn't have any repercussions. The company's founder was recorded berating an Uber driver in the ride, and then the Delete Uber hashtag followed the travel ban that President Trump had called for. So this actually hurt both growth and company culture. And if Uber would have been a company that invested in communicating and invested in their drivers, made sure that people knew that drivers were super important to them, I don't believe that this would have happened. So in the week following the Delete Uber campaign, they had hundreds of internal resignations. They lost almost 200,000 users, most of whom came over to Lyft, and then their negative public perception tripled. So hopefully this can help you understand why company culture and employee experience is important to invest in from an early stage, all the way up to being a public company and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, let's have a quick look if we have something on offer from Slido. I believe there is. Lyft Talk. Did the number of employees include drivers? If so, what's the number and growth curve of employees excluding drivers?
Good question. So the chart that I showed does not include drivers. Again, drivers are not employees. They're independent contractors. I think today, there are maybe 3 million drivers that are signed up on the Lyft platform. So this was just employees that I've been talking about.
Got it. Next question is, building a dream team in small company versus bigger corporations. What are the differences?
Yeah, so I think small company, this is true probably with any industry. A small company, your individuals need to be more dynamic. They need to cover more bases. There was a time when those 5 areas of employee experience that we were focusing on, it was me and one other woman. We were doing all of that. And by the time that I left, each one of those was its own team, and with multiple people on them. So when you're a bigger company, hopefully you have more budget. That's why getting your leaders bought in is really important, so they know that this is something worth investing in. It's not as easy to convince people versus marketing, for example, which a campaign you can clearly show what you think the impressions were and downloads from a campaign. Where this is something that takes a little bit more time, and really the most effective way you can measure it is through employee engagement surveys.
20 seconds, one last question. What are the main mistakes companies make regarding company culture and how to avoid them?
I think that the main mistake that I see, I work with mostly smaller companies, the main mistake that I see is hiring too quickly. People think, I'm so busy, I don't have time, I just need to get someone in here and help out. And they hire someone who, quickly, if you hire the wrong person, it can turn kind of poisonous for the rest of your team, and then, like poison the well, per se. And they don't really understand how the people that you bring in can affect the rest of the team and the rest of the company. So definitely advise, we would bring in people to help us do better interviews, to do unconscious bias training. Sometimes you'll ask a woman a question, but you won't ask a man a question, or you'll see on someone's resume they went to the same university that you did, and instantly you'll think, they're super qualified, they're just like me, they must think like me, that means they'll work like me. And we don't even realize that we're doing these things, but we're doing them in micro actions every time. So super important to think about the way that you're interviewing.
Thank you so much, Danyelle.
All
Cheers.
right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.